Pod Barbecue.
And I'm Honeyshuckleex, and today we're starting Outer Wilds August. This is episode 1, Storytelling in an Open World. Okay, so we're going to talk about Outer Wilds for the next 4 episodes, and Outer Wilds is a solar system sim, open world exploration game, story-rich, puzzle platformer.
Also, like, spaceship simulator.
Yeah, what else would I put in there? Well, I mean, it is 3D. That is something cool to know, right? It's 3D.
Yeah.
It's 3-dimensional in far more ways than one.
Yeah, it's multi-dimensional and lore-rich, all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of adjectives and little phrases we could talk about what this game is and not really tell you what it is at all.
It is one of the most interesting and well-executed takes on an open world I've ever seen.
I consider it a masterpiece. And the deets quick are, it was developed by Mobius Digital and released in 2019. You can get it on Steam for $24.99. We recommend you do it. Catching these episodes when they come out is less important than not spoiling the game for yourself if spoilers are a thing that bother you.
Yeah, and spoilers are going to be just throughout this episode, throughout the entire series.
This is the only non-spoiler part we're going to have for the next 4 episodes.
Exactly. Go out and buy the game, play the game, and then come back.
If for some reason you don't have a computer that can run it, watch somebody's content. There are people still streaming this game for the first time, and if you're able to watch them through their entire journey, that's kind of the next best thing.
Kinda, yeah. Meanwhile, yeah, support people playing this game, play the game, all that kind of good stuff. You've been warned. Spoilers ahead.
Love the game. Forfeit all mortal possessions to the game.
I don't think it actually asks for much. Except 22 minutes of your time.
Oh, this is one hell of a 22 minutes.
So, we're going to assume you've already played. We're not going to give you the synopsis because it's really hard to give you a synopsis. So, we're going to start with, though, is how Outer Wilds supports exploring the open world in lots of different ways. The kids played separately from me, and they took a completely different tactic than I did in the ways that they approached the whole exploration of the game.
Yeah, so, like, when you get information, you know, like, it's stored in your ship's log, and it has 2 different modes. You have, like, the map mode and the rumor mode. And Honeyshuckleex used the map mode almost exclusively, and we used rumor mode almost exclusively, to the point where I forgot that map mode existed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so how we look at it is we had, like, all story threads kind of lumped together in clusters, kind of like you see strung out on a cork board with the red string and everything.
So yeah, basically we got our information like a detective movie.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Honeyshuckleex got it as a rundown of every sublocation on a planet and sublocations to those sublocations, and
methodical.
Yeah, a planet and its table of contents that you've discovered thus far.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I have my reasons for that I'll get into as we talk about some other things. But do you want to talk about the mechanics of the spaceship/solar system sim that is the setting of the game?
So yeah, the basics of the gameplay and mechanics that are, like, the world you're going through is physically made out of is a solar system with planets orbiting the central star in real time. It's like, it's obviously not to a scientific scale. The distance between the planets are much smaller than real planets, and they're going around the sun. I think it's probably, like, going to be in a much shorter time than you would typically expect.
Yeah, like, some planets have their entire year in the 22 minutes.
Yeah, something that is, you know, leaves room for all those things you get from making a simulated solar system. It implements them in a way that actually makes it applicable to gameplay. That's not just a feature for the back of the box, so to speak. So, I mean, it's like, yeah, some of the specifics of that probably aren't necessary for the parts of the game that, you know, make it the, you know, absolutely amazing experience that it is, but it doesn't detract from it. And it's another level to its, you know, multi-layered experience. But yeah, the thing is with these planets is, like, you know, they're all different sizes, they have their own gravity, and you travel between them by actually, like, flying a spaceship. You know, it's not a cutscene thing either. It's like, you don't just hop in the ship and tell it where to go. There is some of that, but you have to actually make sure it gets off the planet and doesn't have anything in its way. You want to put it on autopilot.
I will say that, like, the ship controls is basically, like, the one part of the game I think really benefits from the intended controller mechanics.
Yeah, there's something to note is, like, it is designed to be played with a game controller with, like, the analog sticks and whatnot, but we all played it with keyboard.
But I watched somebody play it with gamepad, and apparently moving the Nomai orbs for, like, interfacing with machinery, apparently that one's actually really hard with controller, because, with the mouse, you just move the mouse and it moves the ball.
So, yeah, to a certain extent, we got lucky.
Yeah, you know what, like, I'll take it. I think both control schemes are probably just fine.
Yeah, the game is not easy. That's the first thing that I'll say about it, is it's got its challenges on lots of different levels. I mean, facets of the game, because it doesn't have, like, levels,
Yeah, like, I mean, I'll even say it's philosophically challenging.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how you know it's meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, if it makes you really have to stop and think about something, the thing that does that is, like, it means something. That's like, even when you're being presented with something that, on closer, inspection is just bullshit, which I absolutely do not think this game is, it's like, yeah.
On the topic of stopping to think for a moment, I think that kind of leads into some of what I have to talk about, unless there's something else you wanted to say here.
The thing that, can really make the experience complicated is that your jetpack has fuel, and, most of the planets don't have a breathable atmosphere, so you need to bring your own oxygen.
Yeah. I think the only one that does have the breathable atmosphere is, of course, your home planet, Timberhearth. If your home planet didn't have a breathable atmosphere...
Then that means your species doesn't breathe. That's just kind of it. Well, I mean, I suppose, like, fish?
Fish breathe.
But not the...
atmosphere, you're right.
Yeah, they breathe the oceosphere.
No.
No oceosphere there. It is not up to code.
No, thank you. I will say no, thank you.
Okay, so, yeah, I think, with that we have, exhausted the immediately applicable points with this topic.
Well, I would quickly add that those mechanics, the spaceship and the spacesuit, the controls respond differently depending on where you are. Like, and when you're in 0G between the planets, it behaves differently than if you're on Giants Deep, which has heavy gravity, or the Hourglass Twins, which have lighter gravity. Your jumps are going to be different, and they also utilized a jump mechanic that drove me nuts, which is the jump happens when you release the button, which is, I don't know any other game I've ever played that does that. It confused me a lot. It made me miss my jumps more often than I like to admit, which, is a lot.
It's like usually with jumps you have, like, you just press the button and then you'll jump higher the longer you hold it down, or if you just, jump or keep holding it, charge something up and you maybe get more height based off of that, but it's like, I hear that's just kind of the standard thing.
Yeah, a lot of the time when I play games that have, like, a charged jump, it's a 2D platformer, not a 3D platformer. And I think that's kind of the important distinction, I guess. Like...
Of course, contextually, it's not so much charging up your jump as it is physically, compressing your legs to jump.
And it does kind of look like that and feel like that as you press the button. You do squat a little bit, I think, and then boing. And there's a lot of little touches like that.
The quirky jump mechanic is very well grounded in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't detract from immersion at all. And that's what I wanted to say quick, is that these mechanics of space travel and utilization of the spaceship and the spacesuit all felt to me exactly like I imagined that space travel would. My spaceship responded exactly the way I expected it to as I'm trying to escape home planet gravity, and you get to watch the atmosphere dissipate. It has a core of a very immersive and detailed solar system sim and space travel sim. And the noises, it's amazing. My mind was boggled. Like, I felt like I was going to space.
It's like, well, it's definitely, on the grand scheme of things, it's a game that is, science fantasy. There is definitely science in that fantasy. It's just, diverging from that for, the sake of gameplay and, making the world that they wanted, but...
The core mechanics are super solid the whole time. The planets move at the same speed, no matter what loop you're on. The rotations are the same, the timings are the same.
Yeah, the only thing that's really different is the fact that Brittle Hollow falls apart randomly every time, which is weird.
There's a few things that are random. That's one of them.
Yeah.
That got you covered, though?
Yeah.
Alright, so now that we've talked about, like, mechanically what we've experienced and what we've,
First level of understanding of the game is intimating the mechanics. How do I move around?
Yeah, it's about navigating 3D space.
Which, core of open world, is the navigation system. So,
yeah. So I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about these, like, story threads. Or at least, like, I guess how you experience rumor mode. And how, you know, like, the way that it's structured is that it clusters together related topics. Like, the Ash Twin Project is right in the center, and it branches out to its sides with different things like the Black Hole Forge, or the Orbital Probe Cannon. And these are all thematically clustered as well with areas that are nearby. And one of the interesting things about that is because they're all clustered nearby, they sort of have the same puzzle aspects, but taken to greater and greater extremes. For example, on Ember Twin, which is constantly flooding with sand, you need to get there very early to get to the high energy lab. You need to be able to move there fast enough. You need to make sure you have enough air to get through this tunnel, and you have to wait for the sand to get to a certain level, so that way you can actually get over some obstacles, you know, some cacti. And it's just a small window, and if you miss it, you miss it, and you have to start over. And this kind of intense time management says a lot about, like, not only where you're going, but, like, what the Nomai were doing. Because when you're going to the high energy lab, you're trying to see what they're doing with this sort of time delay in warp holes, or rather the warp cores, rather the lack thereof. There's a lack of a delay. There is an anti-delay.
The delay is negative.
Yeah, negative delay, and they're trying to figure that out because, well, you want to figure that out as well because, I mean, if time is weird in more than one way...
It's like stuff is essentially being sent back in time when it goes through the warp. It's like, hey, guess who else is going through time?
Yeah.
22-minute time loops that we're stuck in.
Yeah.
Which we hadn't mentioned so far in the episode, but...
Yeah, like, it's interesting to, like, basically give you a mini time loop in your time loop to get the information that, yes, this is what is causing your time loop, is this warp core delay.
Hey, Hatchling, I put time loops in your time loops so you can time loop while you time loop.
Whoa!
Yeah, it's like, game, you didn't have to game so hard. It's a lot of times I'm feeling that about this. I'm like, okay, so we've got a really immersive sim that turns into a spaceflight sim that turns into a platformer to solve mysteries through astroarchaeology, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that the term you'd use? I don't know what term you'd use for exploring your solar system because it's not quite galactic, right? It's like...
Yeah, I think astro fits.
Okay, so astroarchaeology, we're going to solve these mysteries. So yeah, finding the Ash Twin Project, going through you've got this already 22-minute time constraint. So you only have 22 minutes to do anything you want to do in the solar system.
Mm-hmm. And then this one has an even tighter, I want to say, like, around 7-10 minute range for this one, maybe. And then you have to do it again, because you have to not only do it for the high energy lab, but also for the sun station. And that one's an even tighter window. It starts a little bit earlier, and then you only have, like, 30 seconds to get through without dying.
Yeah, they made it really tight. The place you need to go is covered in sand until it's not, but if you wait too long, then it's got cactus blocking your way. Yeah. And in this game, if you try and jump over a cactus, you'll pop your suit, and then you lose all your air. And you hurt yourself, so...
It's like, yeah, you try and brute force the cacti, you're gonna cacti.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And again, I think that that's just also very fitting because you're dependent on the life expectancy of the sun station, which is not long at all.
Yeah, it wouldn't really be worthwhile to go through the cactus to just get it to a warp pad that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. And of course, that's sort of thematically fitting with the nature of how you perceive the time loop, where you have to rush to do things, and then these are taken to the extreme. But then there's also the other kind of exploration that I think is noteworthy here, which is kind of a thrill-seeking legacy. So you have Feldspar, who is one of the founders of Outer Wilds Adventures, who has this incredible legacy of exploring, like, every planet and getting to, like, the bottom of a lot of these mysteries, especially Giant's Deep. And if you go find them, you can learn at least a part of how to get to the center of Giant's Deep. But even then, they won't tell you all their secrets. You have to find the rest of it on your own, and this requires you to go to Brittle Hollow and do this absolutely ridiculous platforming in order to get the information that maybe Feldspar just found randomly. And it's like you have to jump through all these hoops to fulfill this sort of a reputation or legacy that Feldspar did. Like, you know they did it first.
And kind of literally, too, because some of it you have to just let yourself free fly through the air in hopes of catching an elevator. You know what it's like?
Yeah, it feels kind of deep. It might have been almost effortless for Feldspar to do this, but you have to figure it out and go through all these obstacles.
Task failed successfully.
I mean, if it isn't effortless, then yeah, it really builds up, Feldspar's status as, like, one of the greatest space travelers of your people's history.
Definitely the boldest.
Definitely that, yeah. But, like, this isn't even not touching on the fact that in order to even meet Feldspar, you need to go through Dark Bramble, and that's nerve-wracking and terrifying.
The absolute scariest part of the game.
Yeah, it's like, one of the scariest places in a video game I can recall visiting.
Yeah, sun blowing up? No big deal.
That's just a constant. You have plenty of time to more or less get used to that.
Especially by the time you decide to go to Dark Bramble, because it just doesn't look inviting. It's basically a cloud with a big, well, if you've ever been to the Pacific Northwest, you probably have noticed something called a Himalayan blackberry. And I would not be surprised if the Dark Bramble was inspired by the Himalayan blackberry.
Yeah, it's like, I've dealt with a lot of it. I used to live out in the country, and there was a lot of infestation of the stuff. It's like, yeah, it would just kind of climb all over everything. And yeah, notably, I, got really ambitious and tried to chase some of it back to its source. And it will just come from these kind of hearts, these bulbs. And it'll just have a bunch of roots shooting out of them. It's like, Dark Bramble looks about like if you had a moon-sized one of those into a planet.
And then it basically explodes the planet, which I hate that the wiki says it implodes. I'm like, that is not what implosion means. It is.
Yeah, you could make an account and try to get an edit through, probably.
It's like, I mean, I can see how you might interpret that as an implosion. Like, maybe it's just like the bits aren't actually burst out, the bits that remain of the planet. It's like it pulled the rest of it in.
Yeah, that's possible.
That's not really the vibe I get from it, though.
Me neither.
No.
It seems like it grew until it couldn't be contained anymore and burst everything out, which would be an explosion. But, that's just me being nitpicky about something that really doesn't matter, because the big thing is that Dark Bramble's freaking scary. Even just flying into a spiky space... God, what, I'm like, it's vine that just looks completely hostile, full of mist... And, like, it contains itself.
It's like the bounds of, how much space the Dark Bramble even contains is like, it's definitely more than it looks like on the outside and may or may not be infinite.
Actually, it's only infinite in that it contains a loop. If you go to the wiki, they do have a map.
Yeah, I mean, the game has to have boundaries somewhere.
Right, yeah, I guess.
Theoretically, if you wanted to put in a procedural generation element, you could definitely do it in Dark Bramble.
Yeah.
Oh, God, please, no. Don't do that.
But anyway, we didn't even get to the worst bit. Then it's infested with...
anglerfish.
You're like, what? Anglerfish in space? Yes, this game has space anglerfish that eat your whole freaking ship.
How you get around Dark Bramble is, just those self-contained spaces that connect between each other through nodes that, appear as glowing dots, like an anglerfish lure.
Yeah, and, like, this is another part that just falls under that whole thrill seeker thing where, like, you have to sometimes get real close to the anglerfish and you just can't make a sound. You cannot move, you cannot make a peep.
So you catch their attention, you're...
And they growl at you first. And you can hear them, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes because, like you could see me breathing in the mist. And it's terrifying. And if they get you, you gotta start the whole thing over. You gotta fly back to the Dark Bramble and try to get in, and it's not easy.
It's like, yeah, the game does have the benefit of this is the only place that's, quite like that. So, you don't have to fight a whole game's worth of tense horror encounters that...
I mean, you could say for, like, most of the game that their challenges are pretty isolated to where they are, and that's intentional, because you want each planet to have its own identity, otherwise what's the point of having different planets?
Yeah, it's like the difference is much different than, what text logs are going to be on the planet and what the scenery looks like.
Mm-hmm. Or what animals you might have found if there were animals in this game.
Besides just ones that want to eat you.
Yeah, I mean, the jellyfish don't want to eat you, but, I mean, it's weird that they don't, considering how jellyfish work. I know, my disbelief is supposed to, already be suspended because of how the solar system is, but, I mean, come on.
There's just something fundamental about your setup that just triggers a distinctly unappetizing response. Well, unappetized response.
Apparently, according to Feldspar, the feeling's mutual. So,
yeah, Feldspar has definitely tried to eat one.
Yeah, it's like, this dude is so bold. It's like...
There's nothing they won't try at least once.
Yeah, and they're not even in a time loop.
Yeah, how are they alive? Nobody knows. In fact, everybody thinks they're dead.
Until we find them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, where are we drifting right now?
Feldspar's just cool, okay? Feldspar's cooler than you.
Feldspar is cooler than you. Cooler than me, too. Well, I mean, by far. I mean, I approach this really, really timid, while the game, through the time loop, giving you that minor sense of immortality, encourages boldness, and I did, which you guys will admit, right? I did get more bold.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You yeeted yourself all over Brittle Hollow.
Ah! Smack!
It's like, yeah, you did stuff we didn't even attempt.
You're... Normally, I try to stop by, landing safely. You stop by slamming into walls.
I got better after a bit, but at first, I felt much safer slapping into the wall than falling into Whitehall Station again.
You single-handedly probably fell into the black hole more times than Nomai did across 2 generations.
Rude. No kidding. Wow. This is what I live with, by the way.
I was just gonna stop at maybe the two of us combined, but...
To be fair, Nomai actually had bridges and working walkways, and they didn't have to jump across the open gaps anywhere near as much as I did. So
yeah, they had handrails and safety precautions.
Yes. Still rude, though.
Yeah.
But anyway, thinking about Feldspar and his boldness makes me think just in general about Hearthians and about how the game, while not going into great written detail, you don't have to read books about it, just using environmental stuff and very few conversations really paints a picture about what Hearthian culture is like. The fact that they're building this space program up from scratch, but their scratch is actually based on ancient technology from another civilization.
Yeah, less scratch, more scraps.
Right. Yes. The fact that the spacesuits got duct tape on it and part of the ship is made of wood. It's janky, but that's what makes Hearthians so lovable and they so relatable kind of as human beings, because I think that, I know personally as a human being, I feel like that when we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, depending on technology that we don't really understand, because it's a collective effort of our human culture. So, I mean, there's that. But, sorry, I'm going to sidetrack myself if I'm not careful. But just through conversations between the Hearthians and the museum, you learn a lot about what Hearthian culture is like. And just like their janky spaceship, they're kind of fly-by-night too, you know? It's like, oh well, so the space program regularly burns down the village. It does so less than it used to.
And it's like, yeah, you have the whole thing where in their history, it's like they cite Feldspar as the first one who intentionally left the planet because they're getting shot up into space by geysers.
Is our assumption, because it's never explained for sure, but yeah, it's like, and we think that, you know, while that's a joke in the game, it also has a basis in their Parthian history.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, that's the thing they really do that's good with conveying the culture to you, is they don't tell you about it, you just live in it. That's great world building. Do that.
Yeah, it's like, this is how you live, you know, like somebody asks you, like, oh, hey, can you help me fix, do you want to, like, do this thing for me, please? It's like, sure thing, I'll go test that thing out.
Right, I'll test this thing out, I'll go fix this other piece of equipment. I mean, that tutorial is spot on. It's amazing. If I hadn't gotten so hung up on how long's a day, it would have been nicer for me. So anyway, you know, you learn about being a Hearthian. Okay, so I'm a Hearthian. Hearthians are kind of like Earthlings, but cuter. I mean, let's face it. Those big-eared, blue-skinned, four-eyed cuties. I mean...
Yeah, it's like, even the gnome, I thought they were cute, even though it was like, they met them in a...
larval stage.
Yeah, it's like, you know, they, like, met the monkeys that became us.
Yeah, they were just like, oh, they have 4 eyes, it's so cute.
Except, these ones were more salamanders or something.
Yep. That's my impression, is like, oh, you're subterranean salamanders. That's cool. And the way that you learn that through murals on the wall, it's like, as well as writings. And so then, as now we're traveling space, you've left your Timberhearth planet, and you're going through space, and you're slowly learning Ruin Explored versus by Ruin Explored. One, that the Nomai are definitely gone. Every Nomai you find anywhere is a skeleton, or
sometimes in a spacesuit, sometimes not.
Right. But I assume, I mean, I'm not going to make any assumptions. Let's just not. They're skeletons. In my canon, for me, they're all skeletons. It's been long enough that that's how they are, and that's who they are. Great.
Most of the spacesuited ones, you know, they have their suits punctured and you can see bones inside.
Cool. I'll take that. So anyway, as you're finding, the Nomai are all gone. We don't know what happened to them, and they all seem like they were interrupted in the middle of what they were doing. Because you don't find them, like, all gathered together. They don't seem like they were in battle. In fact, there are no weapons anywhere in this game.
It's like, you can see things they use to travel through space. You don't typically see any remains near them.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there would be if they were trying to actively escape something.
Yeah, like, you go down to, like, their school, and you see children at school. Their skeletons are on the floor. You see people just in their houses. You see people at their temples.
And in their spaces where they're working on these scientific things that are most of the concern of what's happening in the game. And, okay, so they're gone suddenly. What happened to them? And then, of course, the sun blows up, and you're like, oh, that's your fault, you guys. And so I am, unlike most people, as I'm slowly reading the Nomai writing as I'm going around exploring this stuff, it's like my first thing is like, oh, what's happening? And who are these people? I'm like, okay, I'm in a time loop that has something to do with the Nomai, and our sun is exploding. What did they do? What stupid thing did they do? And the more the story progresses and the more information you find about them, and then, what's this Ash Twin project? Oh my god, they deliberately blew up the sun. Is that what happened to them? If it did, how come we're alive and they're dead? What?
Yeah, like, and I mean, most people pick up the pieces that you're supposed to think that the Nomai blew up the sun. It's just, I've never seen anybody else put on that layer of, oh my god, these guys are reckless dumbasses.
Oh yeah. I mean, their story of them in the eye made me go, what? What? Who gets a signal for the first time and said, yes, let's take my family there? You know, I mean, when I think of something that's older than the universe, I think eldritch. I think godlike compared to us. We're talking intergalactic kind of consciousness here. I don't try and make first contact with that, by bringing my entire house with me. It's just not what I'm gonna do. And so it seemed really stupid to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So me thinking about Hearthian culture and Nomai culture was, oh my god, these guys are both the same level of dumbass. Just one is more technologically advanced than the other. They're both just as reckless. They're both just as bold. And they get themselves into all kinds of trouble that they're just not ready for. And...
Yeah, I mean, of course, uprooting an entire, basically moving an entire city to go chase the signal is a bit more Nomai standard culturally, since how much Nomai sounds like nomad is not a coincidence. It's like, we know nothing about their home world. They all seem to move around in, essentially floating space cities. Giant spaceships.
Yeah, of course, I don't expect the Hearthians to have known that. That's more of something for us to connect with.
Yeah, you put a Hearthian in that situation, and that's not what they're gonna do, because they, at the very least, when we get to know them, they are very much rooted on their home planet.
Yeah, they're very home-centric because they haven't had an opportunity to really not home. This is their first time ever to not home.
And so, through the study, all the tutorial type study, when you're on the Hearthian homeworld, you can see that they don't seem to be very super spiritual either. There doesn't seem to be any Hearthian mystic traditions. I mean, the closest you get is kind of Gabbro going, well, what will be, will be. And everyone else is very in the moment, just dealing with what they're dealing with right now, and oblivious to the time loops, of course, and not having any clue that it's their last 22 minutes of existence. And, that was really hard on me, wandering around Timberhearth after I knew we were in the time loop, and after discovering that everyone's doomed and trying to figure out how to stop the sun from blowing up, because, once you're introduced to the concept that, oh my gosh, the Nomai had a plan to blow up the sun, it's like, what? You just discovered the technology to basically wind time backwards, and you're going to use it to blow up the sun that your whole civilization, as you know it, lives with. So in essence, you trust your time loop, on one hand, so much that you're willing to risk everything again after having lost contact, with the rest of your people, lost half of the people that came with you through this tragedy of them warping here without sending a scout or anything and ending up in the middle of Dark Bramble. Just these impetuous, impulsive decisions that they continue to keep making. Like, oh, we understand time travel, even though we just discovered it right now. We think we get it enough that we're going to risk everything all over again. We won't remember we're risking everything all over again until it pays off, so it doesn't matter. And we're like, what?
Yeah, we won't suffer at all because we won't remember the loops. None of us will have to actually permanently live through a supernova.
Right.
That would be a horrible thing to subject somebody to, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's actually what they say, too. That would be a terrible thing.
Yeah, imagine going through this again and again and not being able to turn it off.
And I want to feel the jaw drop again when the machine tells you how many times it's been through this already. When I'm like, 9 million times?
9 million times.
The time loop has been going 9 million times before I tapped into it. What? Oh my god. Frickin' Nomai? But it's like they're trusting this technology that they're just developing for the first time, combined with the same person who built the cannon that they're going to utilize the time loop to use, saying, oh, it doesn't matter if I power it so hard it breaks. Like, there's no safety features like any of this stuff, and it just blows my mind.
I love that there's the line of dialogue like, do you think reminding him that his wife is on board might make him show a little more strength? Not strength, but
restraint.
Restraint. And just the reply of, who do you think is part of the problem?
Yeah, the Nomai writing, just the style, the way it's stylized, and the way it's set up, and how easy it was for them to use so little text. I mean, it's like pretty much all the text in the entire game from the Nomai would fit in one book from Skyrim. You know what I mean? It's just not very much at all, really. And the level of detail that you get in there, where you can see generations of people in these new settlements since the migration and estrangement from the rest of the Nomai clans. And just the branching of the words in that feather that, they use as their writing style, showing relationship. It's like we know that they have at least two genders. They call people he and she, while the Harthians are all they. And hatchling, it's like, okay, so they'd probably lay eggs? Hatchlings come from eggs? Okay, that's cool. So we know something about Harthian biology, and we know a little bit about Nomai social structure just from these little things. Like they get married, they still interact with their siblings, they have, and they also have friend relationships.
Yeah, and we've seen the childhood of Solanum, who is the recurring character that you see through the Nomai writing, and you can see her start to grow up, and you can see that she's had several mentor figures throughout the course of her life. She's got the teacher at school, she's got the people in the temples, she's got the person who spearheads the quantum pilgrimage. She's had so many mentors, so they have this interconnected, it takes a village to raise a child mentality.
Yeah, which they give to you in little tiny bits, but those bits are so detail-rich without being super wordy.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to Solanum, it's just like, the way they handle the storytelling around that one character is like, yeah, sure, she's the one Nomai you actually get to communicate with, but that's not the end-all be-all of, Solanum's story. How she existed in the world you're exploring.
Yeah, like, the fact that you get to actually meet her, or at least 1/6 of her, I guess, is really, really cool.
Oh, yeah. That was amazing. Even though, I love that you find out that, like I was trying to counterpoint, that Harthians are kind of, they're earthy. They're very homebody, but they're also scientific-minded and curiously exploring their solar system now that they have the capability to do so. The Nomai are curious about their universe, and exploring it is a big part of their culture. And they're very scientific-minded, but also deeply spiritual. They had no problem making a new religion and using that religion to conceptualize the new history of their clan now that they're isolated from the rest. They talked about the pilgrimage as being symbolic of how, even though we're spread across the universe from the rest of our people, and we ourselves exist in a couple different communities, the quantum moon joins us all. That's pretty rich stuff for the tiny bit of text we actually get. It's amazing storytelling. And the fact that you can access it out of order and it still kind of all falls into place is how they really just rose the bar and then just basically shot it into space. It's like it fell in the sun. The bar for how storytelling can be done in an open world. I can't wait to see what Mobius does next, because
making a story that works non-linearly is not easy, and they did it all over this game.
And I like that also this non-linear nature is also actually relevant in Nomai script, because the way that they write their spirals means that you can connect multiple threads of conversation back to one root. Mm-hmm. It's so cool.
There's a clear visual indicator of what the conversation structure was of the writings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it allows you to have, simultaneously two different arguments going on at the same time from one point.
It's like it is otherworldly and it is practical. Exactly what you would want the writing of the Nomai to look like. Yeah, they thought of it and put it in the game.
It's beautiful.
Very. It just... the level of detail that all of that has. And just... sorry, I'm... end up in a loss for words, because it is hard to find words to talk about. It's just a video game. But I also now, have whole, fiction does that. I like some high fantasy fiction that, really utilizes different cultures and all that kind of stuff. But in my solar system space flight sim, I did not expect this. You know, it's like, and that culture stuff exists to enrich the story that they're trying to tell, you know, and to lead you on this mystery-driven path of what happened to the sun? How dumb were the Nomai? Because for me, that's what it was. I'm like...
we could phrase it as how big are the Nomai's ambitions.
Yeah.
Where did their curiosity lead them, and how much was it responsible for getting them all killed?
Right, and how much was it responsible for getting the rest of us killed, too? And turns out, not.
Yeah. Like, the Nomai were right about everything. Everything they write down is correct for their, like, understanding of the universe. And...
Yeah, that's just the thing, though, is like when they placed all that faith in their time travel technology they just discovered, yeah, that's the part of it that they got absolutely right.
Enough so that it works 280,000 years later.
It's like even when they're gone, when the conditions were finally met, when the sun finally went nova on its own, the time machine worked.
9 million times!
They finally found the eye of the universe. The very thing that had led them to that solar system in the first place.
So why don't we go?
Go ahead. You've been waiting, sitting on your hands.
You know the coordinates by heart. Take us in.
So, disabling the time loop, we need that core. We need that warp core in order to power the vessel.
Yeah.
We take it, head there, and many people have different motivations going here. Some people are powered just by curiosity. What is this thing like? Others are seeking to desperately keep the solar system alive, keep the universe alive.
Save the Hearthians.
Save meaning. Well, there's no meaning if you're dead, right?
You just want to put this whole apocalypse thing on hold and go back to Temper Hearth and retire.
Yeah, and maybe the Eye of the Universe, which if you've talked to Solanum, might be infinite possibilities. Surely in one of those possibilities, you can save your home. And you get there, and you can't. It's just the way the universe works. There's infinite possibilities, and yet in all of them, the universe ends.
Every last star finally gives up its ghost.
Every supernova happens.
The once starry sky is left dark.
And it's kind of a really heavy, really dark thing to really be saddled with when you reach this place of understanding that the Nomai searched so hard for, and, well, it wouldn't have helped them get home. It wouldn't have taught them much aside from the universe ends, at least from your understanding. So what do you do now that you're here? Does time exist? Are you real?
The eye of the universe is, as the game portrays it, quantum. It is the quantum capital of the known and most likely unknown universe. See, the thing is, that's the thing about all the quantum stuff, is where it even physically is dependent on whether or not you're looking at it. How you perceive it is where it finds itself in your universe.
And it's no coincidence it's shaped like an eye.
So, here.
Maybe the only reason you exist is because it can see you.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of Nomai debate, philosophical, about is the eye actually calling out? Is the eye sentient? Can it see? Or does it just look like an eye? And we don't have any answers for that.
What I liked is that even when you get up close and you're standing on it, it still looks like an eye.
So, yeah, point being, it's like, yeah, if the quantum is receptive to your perspective, what happens when you put your perspective inside the quantum?
Oh no!
You join the liminal. That's my take on it, is that it transports you to a liminal space. Kind of created just for you, out of things that you're going to recognize.
The eye of the universe, the place inside of it you reach, is shaped by what you remember, what you've seen. What once was receptive to your perspective is now made out of it.
Yeah, like, to explain to you the nature of reality, it takes you to the museum.
And all the entries have been changed to reflect what you've learned on your journey has come to pass and make the inevitability of what's happened very clear. The universe you once knew is over. You exist outside of it now.
So what do you do with a reality that now shapes itself around not just your perception, but your experience and what is familiar to you?
Yeah, essentially that involves, kind of physically walking through a good handful of metaphors. The game just literally is that at this point.
I think that, one of the more powerful parts of this is that when it's showing you this safety, what it does is it brings you your friends. It brings you all the other space travelers in the solar system.
Even the Nomai you've met on the Quantum Moon. You gather together and you play music.
And the song is the new seed.
And then you collapse the possibilities. And you have the Big Bang.
The inevitable is going to pass. The only thing anything gets past that is if we all come together and journey into the unknown possibilities together.
It gives me chills every time.
It passes on the legacy of hope, the capability for life as we know it, but not individual. The concept of life as we know it, in the physical realm as we understand it.
This new world has no Timber Hearth or its Hearthians.
It's got no Nomai or their vessels.
But it has life.
And marshmallows!
And marshmallows. And marshmallows.
Somehow, despite it all, marshmallows managed to be a consistent... Well, and they do have recognizable trees, so...
Trees are kind of an interesting constant.
It's like they were different trees, but the Nomai had them. That's why they got their air, too.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but I understand from a design standpoint to put trees everywhere.
Yeah, it's, mechanical. It's a certain visual language to the player that trees mean air. And even if they're different trees than the ones you're used to at home, they're still trees.
I guess that also brings about that feeling of safety when we see that ending. Is that they have trees. They are safe and they are living. They are thriving.
It's like one of the fundamental pillars of your physical ability to exist and live in your solar system. You pass that down to them.
And life goes on. Even after the universe ends.
Like, even if all your hopes didn't get met, you still had them, and you still did something with them.
You couldn't save what you had, but... Well, what about something else? Maybe it doesn't need to live on in the shape you thought it did.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Whew.
So, in conclusion, yeah. Outer Wilds raises the bar for storytelling in an open world game. And it does so without being heavy-handed with how it makes you play, without making you find some linear path, without using cutscenes, without...
This game's not about using, arbitrary barriers or invisible walls or having the game suddenly screech to a halt to have an NPC tell you to come back over here to where the gameplay is happening.
Nintendo, take notes!
So, yeah. That's storytelling done well in an open world game. And we'll conclude our first Outer Wilds episode.
Feels good. Feels good.
We'll see you next week, where we'll talk about the DLC, Echoes of the Eye.
Boy, echoey.
Yeah, absolutely. And spoiler alert, they knocked that out of the park too. Anyway, I'm Giggleclutz, and this has been Collab Not Multiplayer.
I'm Honeyshuckleex.
I'm Sackbot Barbecue.